Hello everyone, got a few dirty jokes for you today. So a Scotsman left the bar one evening, and one could tell by how he walked he drank more than his share. He fumbled around until he could no longer keep his feet, and he stumbled off into the grass to sleep beside the street. Well, about that time, two young and lovely ladies passed him by, and one looked to the other with a twinkle in her eye. Do you see that, Scotsman? I wonder if it's true what they don't wear anything beneath their kilt. They crept up to the sleeping Scotsman as quiet as they could and lifted up his kilt about an inch so they could see beneath the Scotsman's skirt. There was nothing more than God had graced him with upon his birth. Well, they marveled for a moment, and one said, "We must be go. Let's leave a present for our friend before we move along." As a gift, they left a blue silk ribbon tied around his willy. Well, the Scotsman woke to nature's call and stumbled toward the trees. When he sees the ribbon, he smiles and says to his manhood, "I don't know where or what you've been up to, but I see you've won first prize." So a young doctor had moved out to a small community to replace a doctor who was retiring. The older doctor suggested the young one accompany him on his rounds so the community could become used to a new doctor. At the first house, a woman complained, "I've been a little sick to my stomach." The older doctor said, "Well, you've probably been overdoing the fresh fruit. Why don't you cut back on the amount you've been eating and see if that does the trick?" As they left, the younger man said, "You didn't even examine that woman. How'd you come to your diagnosis so quickly?" "I didn't have to. You noticed I dropped my stethoscope on the floor in there. When I bent over to pick it up, I noticed a half-dozen banana peels in the trash. That was what was probably making her sick." The younger doctor said, "Pretty clever. I think I'll try that at the next house." Arriving at the next house, they spent several minutes talking with a younger woman. She complained that she just didn't have the energy she once did. "I'm feeling terribly run down lately." "You've probably been doing too much extra work for the church," the younger doctor told her. "Perhaps you should cut back a bit and see if that helps." As they left, the elder doc said, "Your diagnosis is almost certainly correct. But how did you arrive at it?" "Well, just like you did at the last house. I dropped my stethoscope, and when I bent down to retrieve it, I noticed the preacher under the bed." So a blonde redneck guy finds a lamp. He rubs it, and a genie emerges. The genie tells him he will be granted 3 wishes. The guy thinks for a moment and says, "First, give me a bottomless mug of beer." A mug of beer appears in his hand. He sips it once, then again, and the mug is magically refilled. The guy is thrilled and continues to drink. The mug never empties. Then the genie says, "And what about your other 2 wishes?" The guy thinks for a moment and says, "Give me 2 more just like this one." So during a good manners and etiquette class being held for high schoolers, the teacher says to her students, "If you were courting a well-educated young girl from a prominent family and during a dinner for 2 you needed to go to the toilet, what would you say to her?" Mike replies, "Wait a minute, I'm going for a piss." The teacher says, "That would be very rude and improper on your part." Charlie replies, "I'm sorry, I need to go to the toilet. I'll be back in a minute." The teacher says, "That's much better, but to mention the word toilet during a meal is unpleasant." Hearing this, little Johnny answers, "My dear, please excuse me for a moment. I have to go shake hands with a personal friend, whom I hope to be able to introduce to you after dinner." So Fred is 34 years old and he is still single. One day, a friend asked, "Why aren't you married? Can't you find a woman who will be a good wife?" Fred replied, "Actually, I've found many women that I have wanted to marry, But when I bring them home to meet my parents, my mother doesn't like them. His friend thinks for a moment and says, I've got the perfect solution. Why not find a girl who's just like your mother? A few months later, they meet again and his friend says, Did you find the perfect girl? Did your mother like her? With a frown on his face, Fred answers, Yes, I found the perfect girl. She was just like my mother. You were right, my mother liked her very much. The friend said, Then what's the problem? Fred sighed, My father hates her.